Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman, who's been really digging deep into Pirkei Avos and sharing with us the depths. We were fortunate enough to get through Mishnah 10 of chapter 2 last week, and so we're on a fresh new one, Mishnah 11, so I look forward to hearing what the rabbis got to share on this. No doubt this one's going to take more than a week or two for sure. So let's just tune right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. Shalom, Rabbi Coffman. Always good to be with you, sir. Glad to be with you. And we're going to turn the class over to you.
Always a pleasure. And, as we always say, it's, if I hit a Mishnah one shot, that's even better. But I guarantee this Mishnah, you're not going to hit in one shot. That's for sure. I think there'll be multiple classes here. So we were talking about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right? So he had a number of students that we spoke about last week, and spoke about the importance of having, a rabbi, what makes someone a student, what makes someone a rabbi,
beautiful,
etc. So says the Mishnah over here. He used to enumerate their praises, right? He used to say, to speak about their praises. Rabbi Elazar ben Hirkinis, it's like a cemented cistern that loses not a drop, right? Meaning, doesn't forget anything. We'll see. Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, praiseworthy, is she who bore him, right? Who gave birth to him. All right, let's see what that means. Rabbi Yossi the Kohen is a scrupulously pious person. Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel, fair sin. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is like a spring flowing stronger and stronger. So we're going to have to see each one according to what they're known for, what their, main strong character trait is, how they
lived it, they typified it, right? They exemplified.
Yeah, how they're defined, I guess, in certain ways. So the first one is Rabbi Elazar ben Hirkinis. Rabbi Elazar ben Hirkinis, the Mishnah says, is like a cemented cistern, doesn't lose a drop, right? Meaning, he didn't forget anything he learned.
Wow.
Now, it's brought down that, the rabbis used to learn, and go through everything they learned once every 30 days. So if you go through everything you've learned, you've heard, or whatever, it's going to be like second nature, right? Not
inevitably, sure.
You're going to forget. We mentioned many times, people don't like to review. People would rather learn something new than actually relearn or go through something that they've already learned, right? It's a lot more, I would say it's probably a lot more fun to tackle something you haven't gone through than to actually tackle something that I know, that I've gone through. So, says about Rabbi Elazar ben Hirkinis, whatever he learned, he reviewed, and he reviewed until it became second nature. So we mentioned, person who learns something new, more exciting, it would sound like. Because here, I'm putting my effort to actually getting a new idea, a new concept, or something like that. But when it comes comes to review or looking at something that I already learned, we're lazy. We're absolutely lazy. So what's the person going to say? The person will say, I learned that. So if I learned it, why go over it? Well, what's the reality? The reality is the person gets clarity when they review things many, many times.
For sure.
Right? Not only that, they can give it over much better. They don't have to think, right? They don't, we mentioned by teachers, for instance, someone who gives over Torah, and if they themselves don't have it clear, what's going to happen? They can't give it over. The people will come out, more confused. I had someone wanted to listen to some so-called rabbis. I told them, let me know what happens afterwards, which I had a pretty clear idea what was going to happen. And so the person contacted me and said, yeah, I heard this person speak. and I came out more confused than when I went in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what does that tell you? It tells you that that person didn't know what he's talking about. And if he doesn't know what he's talking about, you can't give that over because he doesn't have clarity. In other words, if you have clarity, if a person does their job right, they give over something. Now, people can ask questions. There are legitimate questions to ask, on any given topic.
Sure.
But if someone is good and really good at giving over, many of the questions already go by the wayside.
Oh yeah, I've seen some really eloquent speakers that just can select that right word that just clicks with everybody.
So what you have is someone can answer or give over information where someone else coming along said, "Oh yeah, I have this question." Bam, it gets answered. Or they make an inference. "Oh, I thought this, but now he's saying like this," etc. If we'll look at learning, a little bit. Let's say I'm learning something, and I had a question. Right? If I'm learning well, then a lot of the questions other commentators ask, I should already ask. Right now, does that mean I'm on that level? No. They're much greater than us, much greater than we'll ever be 10 lifetimes. But the reality is, if a person really, let's say they're learning Chumash, they're learning the Bible, they're learning Talmud, they're learning whatever, but if they're learning well, then the questions that others ask, they should ask. On the other hand, a person could say, "Hey, that's a good question. Why didn't I think of that?" That's pretty obvious. I didn't think about that. Now, you can look at it in a number of ways. One way is these people are much greater than us. True. Doesn't mean we're going to think necessarily of everything. But the reality is, if I'm learning well, I should ask a lot of questions. We mentioned many times, the Torah does not give us definitions. The Torah tells us things like this week's parsha that we read, which we're still a week ahead of everybody outside of Israel for the next, 12, 13 weeks, something like that. But in Leviticus chapter 23, it talks about the holidays. When you look at the holidays, what does the Torah tell me? The Torah says on Sukkot, I have to sit in a sukkah. What's the problem? No definition. Torah doesn't tell me what a sukkah is. Right? Then it says you got to bring a nice smelling fruit. Some people will think, I don't know, it's a pineapple. Some will think it's a pomegranate, something else. No one in their right mind is going to think it's a lemon on steroids, right? A citron, as it's known, right? And you're going to bring a lulav. You're going to bring willow. You're going to bring myrtle leaf. No definitions. How big? No definitions. What happens if they dry out? What happens if they're cut apart? What happens? Million questions that the Talmud's going to ask. All right, the Torah doesn't say anything. Torah gives me no definition. All right, but if I'm learning the Torah, I can't read it like I'm reading a newspaper, like I'm listening to a sports clip. Something you got to think, and it's taxing on the mind. So you got a lot of things that we could look at and say, "Wow, isn't this obvious?" Well, some things are more obvious, some things less obvious. But the Torah has 70 facets, right? There's 70 faces to Torah. When you're within certain parameters, you're going to say there could be much more, right? Very well could be, but there's one problem, right? What's the problem? I got to be within certain parameters. I can't go outside those parameters, right? I spoke last week on Tanakh Talk, right? I spoke about Jewish men listening to women sing, right? So why did I get onto the topic? first of all, it's a controversial topic, but why did I get onto that topic? Because I put up something, posted something on someone's page on Facebook, and someone took me to town. Someone said, I get up and sing in front of men. I do that in my synagogue. So I was like, well, it can't be orthodox. Oh, it's very orthodox. Okay, maybe it's more modern. Could very well be. Right? But if that's the case, still forbidden. But I do this. Right? So it doesn't matter what people do. The question is what's right and what's behind it. And why it shouldn't be done. Right? All these different things. But yeah, it is a little bit, it is a little bit controversial in a certain way. But when someone says, that's what I do, that's, whatever, this is common in this synagogue. Well, who says it's right? Nobody says it's right by any stretch. That's outside the parameters of Torah. There could be certain leniencies. There are leniencies maybe for certain things, which I mentioned. But at the same time, you have to be within certain parameters. And if you're not within those parameters, I'm not going to waste my time. Why would I waste my time? You're not within those parameters. You're outside those parameters. There are 70 faces to Torah. So, more, 70 different ways to learn, probably more. But that's only when you're within certain parameters. If you're not within those parameters, you can say what you want. And I want to do this, and I want to do that. Well, it doesn't matter what you want to do.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a racy topic for sure. Yeah.
It matters what the Torah says. It matters what the rabbis say.
Right.
I have to listen to them. Because in every generation, Deuteronomy chapter 17, I think that you got to listen to the Kohen and the Levi. In all generations, they say what's right is left. Still have to listen to them. Who are the Kohen and the Levi? In every generation, the rabbis. So you got to listen to them. Oh, they're out of tune. They're out of this. They're out. People, again, I'm going to pick this up tomorrow on controversial issues, where we're going to speak about, sort of crazy things, quote unquote, that the Talmud says. Against, I think tomorrow we're going to speak about a lot of things it says against non-Jews. Right? But 99% of the answer of all these questions is context. You got to look at context.
Oh, for sure.
And if you don't look at context, the Christians, the Messianics, they're very good at taking things out of context.
Oh,
they'll say,
masters.
See, it says non-Jews are not considered Adam. They're not considered human. Why not? Of course they're human. Of course they're human. They eat, they drink, they do all kinds of things. Do they have the same soul that a Jew has? No. Can they transform themselves like a Jew can, like when it comes to mitzvahs? No. So you have to understand what the word Adam means. Oh, you're going to say, we're not human. We're subhuman? And that's where they leave it. They don't want to hear an explanation. Because the explanation, they're going to claim, this is apologetics. Oh, this is something else. But you have to look at the context, what it said. And you might not like the answer.
I look forward to hearing that one.
There are questions. I'll give one example, right? We're not going to speak about this this week. I might speak about it next week, right? But there's a question why you're not allowed to save a non-Jew on Shabbos. If a non-Jew is drowning, right? The Gemara says you're not allowed to save him. So now people say, see, non-Jews are nothing, worse than animals, you can't save them. First of all, that's not what the halacha is. The halacha is you're allowed to save them. But that's not even the point. The point is, why does the Talmud say such a thing? They're going to say, discriminates against non-Jews, makes non-Jews look bad. So let's analyze, right? I'll just give, one piece of information. The entire, the Talmud that's speaking about this is the last point the Talmud makes. The entire piece of Talmud over here explains why are you allowed to save a Jew on Shabbos. It's not the question why you're not allowed to save a non-Jew. The question is how you're allowed to save a Jew. And if that Jew is desecrate Shabbos, and he's not going to keep Shabbos, that's the whole point to save him, because he's going to keep Torah and mitzvahs. If he's not going to keep Torah and mitzvahs, technically I wouldn't have to save him, right? Again, maybe we'll boost the ratings over here. Maybe we boost it on the Roku network, right? But what's the point? The point is, why aren't you not allowed to save a non-Jew? Point is, how am I allowed to save the Jew? So the whole back and forth of that piece of Talmud is, I'm allowed to save the Jew, I'm not, what's the case? And then the Talmud throws in something at the end. Oh, by the way, what about a non-Jew? Right? So the Messianics, the Christians, whoever is going to say, see, it says you're not allowed to save non-Jews, but you missed the whole context. The context is not about saving non-Jews. Context is, how am I allowed to save a Jew? And if you don't fit certain criteria, the Jew shouldn't be saved. Oh, now I'm going to ask about a non-Jew. That's not the same thing, right? That's, in a lot of these questions, what do? They cherry pick. They cherry pick a lot of the most, quote unquote, confrontational, controversial things, and they totally 100% take it out of context. Which they do in the Bible, they do that many times. Totally take things out of context. But the point is that if you look at it and you look at other things that, I'm going to speak about, I want to give away what I'm going to speak about tomorrow. But, there are a lot of things that we're going to see that if you look at the context, you understand what it's speaking about. But again, some people will say, but I don't like that answer. That answer doesn't resonate. It's still bad. Okay, so, I had somebody once tell me, brought a gift for one of my kids, brought a sweater, made fully 100%, it says made out of wool. So the Torah says I can't wear something that's mixture of wool and linen. If it says 100% wool, I have to get it checked. Make sure there's no linen, right? In a suit, they can put linen in, tie up buttons, or they put it in the shoulder pads, or many places you need to check. So the person asked me, so why aren't you allowed to do it? Why do you have to check it? So I said, it's the Torah prohibition of shotness, right? That's what it's called. It's called shotness. Jews not allowed to wear wool and linen together. So they said, well, what's the reason? I said, it's a good question. I'm not really sure. It's a law we don't really understand. It's like 80% of the Torah we don't understand. But this is something like, doesn't make a whole lot of sense in general, right? But Torah says I have to do it. So they said to me, well, if you can't give me a reason, why would I keep it? Okay, good question. And what was my quick answer? And if I gave you 10 reasons, would you keep it? And what's it? Well, you could say, I don't like this answer. This answer doesn't resonate with me. Well, if a person thought philosophically, but all the mitzvahs they should keep and whatever, they're never going to keep nothing. Why aren't they going to keep anything?
Exactly, yeah.
It doesn't fit my world outlook. It's not politically correct.
Restricting, yeah.
Right. It's discriminatory against women. No, it's not. Oh, I think it is. Okay. Evil son. Am I going to answer the evil son's question? No. I'm going to blunt his teeth. He's not interested. I just put up a video, a very short video. I did a bunch of videos on TikTok, right? So one of the things that was about circumcision, right? Famous question. I did on Tanakh Talk, circumcision mutilation. Is that mutilation of the body, right? So I had a great rabbi once say, someone asked you the question, I've never been asked this question, but this would be the answer. Isn't circumcision barbaric? And you say, no, barbarians don't do it. That's how I started out the video. It's a short video. A short video and an idea about circumcision. I'm going to start making a whole bunch of these videos every week. Why we do this, don't do that, some other thing, whatever, very quick videos. But that was a very good line. It's a very, very good line, right, that I've never been able to use. But if anyone ever asks you, then that's a good, that's a good line. So everyone agrees.
Patent pending, right?
Yeah, right. Everyone agrees that the whole purpose of the foreskin on a male is to take it off. There's no other purpose except to take it off. Now, some people will say it's good against cancer to take it off. Some say it's bad against cancer to take it off. And non-Jews are going to stand up and scream and say, I want to do it. I want to do circumcision. What's the problem? There are three things that the Torah calls a sign between God and the Jewish people. This is what I spoke about in circumcision, right? Why it's considered a sign. One of them is circumcision. One of them is Shabbos. One of them is tefillin, what we call phylacteries, for lack of a better term, right? So there are three signs. So non-Jew says, I want Shabbos. I want to keep Shabbos. So give another plug tomorrow, Noahide Nations. If you go on the Noahide Nations Facebook page, they put up a link. They're going to speak about second class about Shabbos and why non-Jews should be not included, in keeping Shabbos. But these are three things that are assigned between God and the Jewish people. I mentioned last week, just give you a prelude, anyone wants to listen, that, I think it's the ultimate in chutzpah, that a non-Jew comes along now and says, I want to do something they're only given to the Jewish people. Now, why do I say it's chutzpah? It's chutzpah for one very simple reason. Because the Gemara in Avodah Zarah 2b to 3a speaks about God going to all the nations and asking if they want the Torah. Right? They go to Edom. They go to Esau. They say, hey, you want the Torah? They say, what's written in it? It says, don't kill. Says, what do you mean? What do you mean, don't kill? What does the Torah say? I'm going to live by the sword. That. So Edom says, no, we're not interested. Goes to Yishmael and asks Yishmael, you want the Torah? And they say, what's written in it? It says, don't steal. Says, hey, but according to the Torah, it says, I'm a wild man. My hand's in the hand of everyone, and everyone's in the hand of me. So I got in trouble for that also. I can't believe I didn't get banned, right? For speaking about, who is Yishmael, right? He's a thief. Essentially, he's a thief. So he says, that's his nature. So what happens? They say, we're not interested. So God goes to all the other nations. They're not interested for whatever reason. God comes to Jewish people and says, you want the Torah? They say, what? God says, you want to know what's written in it? They say, no. They say, Na'aseh v'nishma. We're going to hear, and then we're going to do. You have a track record, we're with you, whatever. So now, all the nations, anybody who wants Torah, they could have joined as the Ramchal says, by the Tower of Babel. If they wanted to join, that's when they could have joined. But God had mercy, even till the giving of the Torah Mount Sinai. A non-Jew could have joined. But what happened? If they didn't join, they got to go through conversion. So I had people say, if I would have been there in my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents' generation, I wouldn't have rejected the Torah. And my answer was, we don't care what you would have done. This is the reality. It's been sealed. You want to go through conversion? Great. Go through conversion. Right? You don't want to go, you don't have to. So I said, why is that the ultimate chutzpah? Because your great-great-great-great-grandparents rejected Torah. And now all of a sudden, you come back thousands of years later and say, nope, I want in. I want to be a part of it. God says it's a covenant between me and the Jewish people alone. You want to join? Join. You don't want to join? Why do you have a portion in it? Right? And if you're going to take off a day and you want to keep it, whatever level, that's a problem. If you're doing it for religious reasons. Now, why would a non-Jew in general want to take on Shabbos? Want to take on the laws of Shabbos? Or take on any aspect of Shabbos? They're not doing it because I just want to rest. They could rest in many other different ways. If they're taking it on because it's a religious thing, that's a problem. That is a major problem. So you get these super Noahites, whatever you want to call them. I got a right to do it. I can keep it this way or I can keep it that way. Doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to you. Right? This problem, it's an issue because they're not doing it for a not religious reason. No Noahide, super Noahide, whatever you want to call them, it's keeping Shabbos has nothing to do with religion. That's a problem. That's a major problem. So bottom line, I can't just do what I want. For them, that might be liable for death penalty. They're making up a new religion. Noahide's not allowed to make up a new religion. No one's allowed to make up a new religion. Right? Knock out the Christians, Muslims, everybody. It's a new religion. Even though some people will say, come on, Islam's closest thing to Judaism, meaning to the Noahide laws, right? I can find issues with that, but that doesn't matter. It's a made-up religion. If it's a made-up religion, the Rambam and others state clear, you make up a new religion, it's over. It's over, we would say in Boston. It's over. You're liable for a death penalty. So you can't just do what you want. It's not about what I want to do. That's how I got onto this. Right? I never know how I get onto these like tangents. You can't just do what you want to do. You want to? That's a new religion. That's Torah made up in your own mind. Then someone will say, but you think you're right. You're right. We do think we're right. We do think we have the truth. Well, I think differently. Okay, show me why we're wrong. They can't. They don't, I want to do this. Okay, that's not an argument. Right? Let's make clear. Bring me sources, bring me something that shows that God didn't give the Torah on Mount Sinai. And that the Torah is not true. You got to show proof. You can't say you're a fanatic. Of course I'm a fanatic. That doesn't answer anything. And if you're on a debating team, you get an F. That's not how you argue. But at the same time, person has to realize you want to be within Torah, you have to be within certain parameters. People can say what they want, that doesn't mean they're within the parameters. Oh, you're so close-minded. Okay, I never claimed to be open-minded. See, someone once told me, said, they said, why don't you send your kids to university? I said, I got a great idea. I don't think you're so open-minded. They said, what do you mean? I said, you send your boys to yeshiva, I'll send my kids to university. Oh, I would never do that. It's a cult. You got proof? It's a pretty strong statement to say it's a cult. Right? Okay, let's hear some definitions. You know what a cult is? They don't let you sleep. They brainwash you. This, that. So they, but you're also brainwashed. I said, yeah, thank God. Brains could use a little bit of squeegeeing over here. But I say, you're also brainwashed. I said, go into a yeshiva. Go see how they learn on a daily basis. Doesn't look like brainwashing to me. People yelling, screaming, this, that, trying to prove their point or what the text says or what it doesn't say. All this is not brainwashing. How's that brainwashing? But I don't want to digress. Here we're talking about, again, you got to be within certain parameters. So here, if a person enjoys learning something new, how are they going to remember what they learned? In other words, if a person continues just to learn new things and they don't review sometimes can be considered a 4-letter word. Why? They're not fun. It's not enjoyable. Right? People don't like it. People don't like it. So, the idea over here is I have to review. Because if I don't review, I'll never remember. Right? So, now there's another question. Right, even before we get to that. So, we mentioned clarity. Where's the person going to get clarity from? The more they go over things. The more they see things, they can see it from a different angle. Because even when you review, you just don't repeat it. You got to think about it. What does it mean? What are the ramifications? There are a lot of times you look at the same thing, you don't think the same way. Days later, month later, you may look at it from a different perspective. Maybe you heard a different perspective, whatever it is. But the more a person reviews, the more clarity they have. Right? If they reviewed it many, many times. Because the Torah, as we understand, has to be clear in a person's mouth. Meaning that if someone asks you a question, give an answer. You give an answer straight away. You don't have to think. It's like second nature. But guess what? If you haven't reviewed it or reviewed it enough, you won't have clarity. But again, we're lazy. we've become lazy. We don't want to review. But imagine the power of someone who knows something after reviewing it many, many, many times. It's right at the back of their hands. They can quote it verbatim. And they know this one says this, someone else says that, other one says like this, but they have the clarity. It's there. If they don't review, it's a waste of time to learn in general. Because you're plowing without seeding. If you plow without seeding not going to do anything. So we mentioned earlier, the rabbis will review everything they learned every month. Quite a bit to review. Right? But even so, look how much they knew and how much they learned. Now, get to the question I wanted to ask. And that is, what is the Mishnah say here? Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkin is like a cemented cistern, does not lose a drop. If a person doesn't forget what he learned, why is that a greater praise than anything else? It's better than someone who gave birth to him, someone who's scrupulously pious, somebody who fears sin. Why is it greater? Why is it greater than anything else? I can understand maybe it's on par or similar. Well, if someone's more pious, scrupulously pious, isn't that stronger than saying someone learned something, never forgot it? That doesn't mean he's pious. Doesn't mean that. Or he's got tremendous fear of sin. You see someone's got fear of sin, they might not be well learned per se. Right? Doesn't mean they remember everything they say. Everything they learned. So why is this greater? Why would I say this is greater than anything else? The reality is, there are people that can train a person to utilize their brain to remember. Not everyone is gifted with good remembrance, right? With the ability to remember so well. Some people have it better, some people not. Some people have been granted a photographic memory. That helps you remember a lot, right? The reality is, it's a gift from above. See, even the amount a person puts in to remember, is that any guarantee whatsoever they're going to remember? No. Not at all. Right? Doesn't mean anything. Remembrance, I would think, means that, okay, I'm going to put my best foot forward, and I'm going to review, and I'm going to review again, and I'm going to review a third time. Now, all things being equal, even if someone is thick-headed like me, you review enough, you should remember. You should be able to remember. Now, you got to put your best foot forward, as we always say. But is that a guarantee? Is that a guarantee I'm going to remember? No. So the reality is, it's a gift from above. It has nothing to do with how much effort a person puts in. It's a gift from above. You can bring a raya, a proof, from Moshe Rabbeinu. God gifted him the Torah. God gave over the Torah. How can you remember so much? You're gonna, even if we would say, he reached the 48th level of understanding, one less than being basically perfect. As great as he was to remember the entire Torah, okay, that's not going to be so easy. At the same time, God gifted it to him. He gave it to him on a platter. Now, even with that, comes on the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim of blessed memory says, as he explains his commentary on the Torah, that a person remembers things better if they're important to them. If it's something important, you won't forget it. If a person was asked how much money they have in their pocket, that's something they would know probably to the dime. They would know. Why? Because it's something important. Something important you're going to put an effort in to remember. You have to remember. My Rebbe would say, money's not everything. It's always good to have in your pocket. Always good to have in your pocket. right? But again, most people, they wouldn't even have to think, right? This is something they would know pretty much. They have $100, $50, $70. They know how much they have, more or less. Why is it? Why? Why would they remember something like that? You say, come on, it's living in this world, it's this, it's that. No. Because that's something that's important. You go out, you should know how much money you have in your pocket. Do I have a check in my pocket, my credit card there, other things. Things that are important, you're going to put in effort to remember. And let's say you don't have a good memory. Someone doesn't have a good memory. What are you going to do? You're going to make notes. You'll have reminders. That's why they have like these apps for anything. Remind you to say the Karen of the Omer. Remind you to say the Shema. Remind you of this. Remind you of that. You know, doctor's appointment tomorrow. This, whatever. Because you don't want to forget. And even if your memory isn't so good, you'll do what it takes to remember. Right? But if it's something important in general, that is not something you're going to forget. Right? Money in your pocket, important enough to most people, they'll know how much money is there. Now, you'll get in the bigger scheme of things. Right? And a person's going to say, come on, is that how shallow people are? It's something that's important to them. Anything that's important to a person, you're going to work hard to remember. And I'm going to illustrate with a story in a second, right, about how far that goes. But if it's not that important to you, that means you're not going to remember. You know, there are stories of Chaim Kanievsky, of blessed memory. The only thing that was important to him was Torah. Anything else outside of that, not so important. Street names, he didn't remember. Phone numbers, he didn't remember. Other things he didn't remember. Why? Because they weren't important. He focused on one thing, Torah. You know, there are people who know baseball statistics like no tomorrow, football, other, entertainment, all that.
CFL draft, man, just happened.
CFL, yeah, it could be all these things. All these things. If it's something important, they know. I mentioned to someone the other day, right? I mentioned about, broken bones, and, this should be for a, what do you call it? A healing. My youngest son, fractured his arm, in a lot of pain. Don't know exactly. Didn't show anything. Didn't show anything on the the X-ray, but whatever. It's still trying to get to the bottom of it. So it should be healing for him. Aaron Yehuda ben Mazel Sisi. But at the time about broken bone. I was talking to someone the other day, broke his leg. I don't know, 2 times, 3 times, whatever it is. So he said, yeah, you remember? I think it was the 1984 draft, right, or 83 draft. That Michael Jordan was drafted behind Sam Bowie. Anyone remembers who Sam Bowie was? Sam Bowie was I'll show you all my knowledge here, all my useless knowledge. He was a 7-foot center, came out of Kentucky, right? He was drafted by the Portland Trailblazers, I think, if I remember correctly. And he's a 7-foot center, drafted before Michael Jordan. Now, he had leg problems. He had certain leg problems, whatever they were. A couple of years in, right? Very, very early in, something happened, snapped his leg in half. That was it. Career over. Right? But he never recovered. Pretty much never recovered. Right? Talking about broken bones and this and that. Why am I throwing that out there? I don't know. I'm showing my unbelievable secular knowledge. Right? But the point is something like that. Why would a person remember that? Why would a person remember, okay, CFL draft, other things, because it's interesting. They remember things because, quote unquote, it's important. And it's real, technically, people know all kinds of things, about, I don't know, minutia of detail that really doesn't matter in the bigger scheme of things. Again, we're talking about things that don't matter. And if they don't matter, why do I know it? Because you say it's still part of your psyche. See, that's a proof. And I haven't thought about this. I can't even tell you how many years ago is 1984, right? 1983, right? So you're talking about 30 years ago, 40 years. What was it? 83, 70? Yeah, 40 years ago, right? My math's a little bit off. 40 years ago. Not like I thought about that in recent times. Even what happened to my son over here. I haven't thought about it in recent times. The last 20 years, probably not the last 30 years, right? Why is that piece of information there? Why is it there? Because you know what? Impurity sticks to a person like glue. Right? And to know that kind of information from way back, it's not like, okay, you reviewed it and say, oh, I remember that. Or I remember this. Okay, some people remember, oh, I don't remember what year it was, who it was, this. People have, different types of bits and pieces. Whether, and other people verbatim can tell you every first round draft pick of their team, for like the last 30 years. Or they can tell you, other things. Why? Because that's important. That's seemingly important, in the mind, focus is to remember, sticks in the heart, and it's there, right? It's totally there. So money, these other things, person's going to remember for the sole reason that it's important to them. Rabbi Chaim Coffman of blessed memory only remembered Torah. The other things weren't important to him. And that's the way we should view things. We don't. You'll say we're not at that level. But you know what? We can always retune the mind and to think of important things. Yeah, it takes you a lot. I heard Rabbi blessed memory, or Brevda used to say, anyone who grew up in America, you could probably put this anywhere, right? Anyone who grew up in America, take your whole life to get America out of your system. Take your whole life. I can start singing certain jingles, commercials from the 70s and 80s. Anyone who's seen them knows them like that. Why? Because they know them. Whatever, you just remember. Roto-Rooter, that's the name, all your troubles down the drain, right? Whatever, all these stupid things. So you're going to say, but your soul, what does your soul do over here? Your soul records it. And it stays there. Now, you got to work very hard to get rid of it. You got to work hard to focus. Right? As we said before, okay, so now I have a different mindset. Now I'm into learning. Right? But I only want to learn things that are new. I don't want to learn things, I don't want to learn things I learned already. Right? Now, there are other people that'll say, yeah, take a secular Israeli, said, yeah, I learned Tanakh. Like you're learning mathematics. I learned Ezekiel before. I learned Zechariah before. I learned this before. Yeah, you learned it like a donkey. That's how you learned it. Right? You know some of the stories. That doesn't mean you learned it. There's a lot of depth over here. Tremendous amount of depth. Learning is relative. Right? You could learn superficially, get something out of it. But you can look at it once, twice, a third time. I remember going through something, I'm learning and going back and forth and this and that. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm going through all this. I didn't understand. Go back. You can't jump forward before you understand what you did before. Then you got to put things together. Right? So you have to review. If you don't review, it's a waste of time to learn. Review is not, some people will say, maybe a lot of people will say, it's not so enjoyable. Because I'm not doing anything new. I want to cover ground. But, if we rethink certain things, we see unbelievable depth. We do see that. Then
I think it takes a few times just to get the neurons firing in certain areas.
Right. But I'm saying, after that, after they're already fired up, and you've gone through, and then you realize, wait a minute, maybe I don't understand exactly what I think, because I just saw something else that sort of throws all that out, and, etc. So review doesn't mean just rehashing of what I did. Review is like, okay,
digesting,
starting from the premise, like I don't know anything, right? So, and that's a praise. You got great rabbinic scholars who've been through certain tractates tens of times, hundreds of times, thousands of times. How in the world could they look at it like it's the first time they never saw it? So that's a very hard thing to do. They know what the early commentators say. They know what the later commentaries say. They know what the Code of Jewish Law says. How are they going to look at it as something new? That's a very hard thing. right? That's a very hard thing, right? So review, there are different ways to review. I can review more in depth, rehash everything and, think it through again. I could go through it more, let's say in a superficial way, just to get the give and take, without necessarily delving into all the details, but you got to make sure it's clear. You can't just read it and have no understanding. So comes along Rebbe Eliezer ben Horkin and he remembers Torah and not forgetting that to him was primary importance. That was the most important thing. Learning, remembering. What people do, or some people do, they sit down to learn, so they review what they did the day before. They review, what they went through the day before, and then they start. Because they want to remember. They want to remember where they were holding and what they were doing, because, you sometimes forget day to day. So for him, that was most important thing. So if a person learns, continue to review, and they review, what happens? Torah becomes a part of them. Torah is like second nature. It's like having Torah in your pocket. So I remember I asked my Rebbe once if I learn Rashi and Tosfos on the Gemara. Someone who learns like that, he holds that you should learn till the end to what the practical Jewish law is. So I said, what if someone doesn't do that? And they only learn, let's say, a few of the commentaries. Is that called Torah in your pocket? And he said, no. You get merit for learning Torah like that. No question about it. You get reward for such a thing. Why is that? Why would he say, and again, not everyone's going to agree with this, but that's okay. Why is he going to say that's not Torah in your pocket? He says not Torah in your pocket because you didn't get to the end. You don't know what the practical law is. Right? When you know the practical law and you can spit it back like this, that's called Torah in your pocket. That's knowing where to answer, etc. And people with different levels. There are people who can tell you, different, disagreements, throughout the Talmud, this thing here, that thing there, something else, whatever. There are some people that have unbelievable encyclopedic knowledge. You're talking about 3,700 pages of Talmud here. There's a lot, forget about the Midrashim and Halachim. There's huge amounts over here to learn, right? Certainly for men. So forgetting, you can't forget. You got to try and remember. Now, you can say, what about women? So women who don't have an obligation to learn, they have to know what to do for themselves. They have to know how to keep Shabbos. They have to know how to keep festivals. They have to know what's forbidden in speaking Lashon Hara. Right? They have to know kashrus. They have to know all kinds of things as well. So they also have to review. They also have to take classes. They also have to live inspired. Now I'm going to tell you a very, very frightening story in different ways. One of the biggest, kisses I ever got, love taps, I would call it, from my Rebbe. I was once telling over a Torah novella, right? I was telling over what I was learning. And I said, so as I was telling over, I quoted one of the commentaries. I said, I quoted this commentary. My Rebbe said, okay, stop. I was like, what do you mean? He said, you quoted it wrong. I said, what do you mean? I said, I just saw it yesterday. He goes, I'm telling you, you quoted it wrong. So he said, go look it up. He goes, take out the Talmud. Go look it up. I go, no offense. I just saw it. Yes, he goes, I'm telling you, you quoted it wrong. Go look it up. So okay. So I got the Talmud, open it up. He goes, okay, read it. I started reading. He goes, who said that? I mentioned one of the Gaonim. The Gaonim came at the end of the Talmud, right? But basically before Rashi, like the year 800, 900, something like that. And about 100 years or so, or more before Rashi. And I had mentioned, Rav Hai Gaon says like this. And it was really Rav Amram Gaon, or one or the other. Right? I mixed them up. So my Rebbe said, who said that? He goes, read it. And I read it. And he said, so you misquoted it. So my Rebbe told me like this. He said, if I were to ask you right now, and this is when I had money. He said, if I were to ask you right now, how much money is in your pocket? Right? He didn't mince words. Right? He said, if I would ask you right now how much money's in your pocket, tell me, you could tell me to the dime. You could tell me almost to the exact cent. So he told me like this. He said, if you can't remember who said what in the Gemara or one of the comments, I think it was Rava. I thought it was Abaye. You thought it was Rav Amram going, it's Rav Hai going, this, that. You can't remember who said what. That means it's not so important to you. And if it's not so important to you, I don't have any obligation to listen. This is what he told me. I didn't hear it secondhand. I heard it straight to my face. Got smacked right upside the head. And he said, because you don't remember who said what, it's not important to you, I don't have an obligation to listen. And he told me, he said, yeah. He said, don't forget to shut the door on the way out and put the Gemara away. He threw me out. He threw me out on my keister. He threw me out of his house, basically. So someone asked me, what were you thinking when that happened? What in the world were you thinking when that happened? At the first of all, I was a little bit in shock that it came out the way it did. I don't think there's any question about that. But then I was like smiling. I said, someone said, how could you have been smiling? I said, because that was the greatest muster I ever heard. That was the great. He didn't tell me to just, to shut me up and, show me I didn't know what I was talking about and this and that and the other thing, right? He wanted to show me that remembering something and who said it and who the rabbis were, you got to be in awe. You got to be in awe. He brought down once a story from David of Karlin. And the story was that on his stender, on his lectern, he had the verses in front of him, Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, which means God is always in front of me. God is always in front of me at all times. So his students asked him, why do you, of all things, of all things, he said that, why specifically that? Why specifically that? So David of Karlin said, when I learned Torah, I never ever want to forget I'm learning God's Torah. God's always in front of me. What do you think he forgot? One of the Torah giants, you think he forgot God's in front of him? He said, when I'm learning Torah and I get so much enjoyment, I want to remember it's God's Torah. I want to remember how so important it is. That it's not something that, who said this, who said that. And it's so much mental gymnastics. I never want to forget I'm learning God's Torah. Here you're talking about a Torah giant. You think for 1 second he forgot who God was. He forgot how important his Torah was. You think for 1 second he's going to think it's mental gymnastics? I don't think so. Right? But my Rebbe here is teaching a lesson. A very, very fundamental. It was I can tell you, I was in shock. I can still feel the sting many, many years later. Right? What did he say? He's telling you, and we said this before, that something that's important to a person, you're never, ever going to forget. Why aren't you going to forget it? Because it's important. Money in your pocket, everybody knows. Most people, again, within however much money they'll get close to, they know how much money's in their pocket. $100, $50, 70 cents, whatever. They know more or less. You know why? Because that's important. That's important. But he said, you can't remember who said what. You can't remember it was a Abaye, it was a Rava, it was this one, it was that one. He said, why in the world should I listen to you? I should listen to what you're giving over. You can't remember who said what. So the moral of the story is, one moral of the story is, is that you want to give over something, someone who knows a lot, make sure you get it right. Make sure you get the quote right. Right? But the thing is, we learn something, we don't always remember. We don't always remember who said what, and say, oh, I think it was something like this, or I think it was something like that. But again, it's not about memory here. We mentioned that it's not about effort in remembering. I can put in all the amount of effort, I can review day in and day out, and you'll say, since the person's working on, remembering, they'll remember. They spend 20 minutes a day, half an hour a day, reviewing, going over it again, a second time, a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time, etc. Then it should be like second nature. So he said, no. Why is it not like second nature? It's only going to be like second nature if God gives it to you. God has to give it to you. You have to put in the effort, as we always say by the Chovos HaLevavos, as the duties of the heart says. You got to put in effort. Otherwise, you won't remember, you won't know. But even if you put in effort, who says, when it comes to, for example, comes to making a living, you put in your best effort, God says, no. You're going to struggle here. You're going to go through this difficulty, that difficulty. When's that going to stop? When's it going to stop? When God says, I got to put my best foot forward. You're right. Got to work hard. You're right. And if things go wrong, or whatever it is, so I got to re-identify. Maybe I have to rebrand. Maybe, I have to do all kinds of things in order that my product should be sold or whatever. Now, you could put your best foot forward and still get a 0. Doesn't mean I don't do it. We always have to put our best foot forward, but guess what? There's a huge X factor. What's the X factor? The X factor is God wills it, and God wants it. And if God wants it, great. And if God doesn't want it, it's not going to matter. So you take someone who's learned Torah and learned, day in and day out. They could struggle. They can very easily struggle, unless God helps them. Because, there are different ways to train the mind, to remember, right? What does the Talmud do many times? In a certain place it stops, gives mnemonics. Gives mnemonics to remember the, page and a half or whatever you've been going through. It'll give you different mnemonics. So there are ways to try and remember. But again, the fact that it's going to stick to a person is absolutely no guarantee, right? There's no guarantee. So knowledge, definitely 100%, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter the effort we put in. The idea is that we have to take it in, and we have to put our best foot forward. Now, putting our best foot forward, is that a guarantee? That's not a guarantee. God has to grant it. 100% God has to grant it. If he doesn't want you to have it, you won't have it. But you have to put your best foot forward. Right? So over here, what's important? What's important to a person? How much the stock exchange has gone up or down in the last 20 years? Football statistics, CFL, right? What's so important to people? And we'd be shocked. I don't think we'd be shocked. I think we know. We know what's really inside of us. And if a person's in the middle of prayer, let's say, and their mind is wandering about whatever it is, why would a person's mind wander? You're standing in front of God, asking for all your needs, and you're thinking about, third round draft pick. And something comes up in your mind. You're thinking about why your team blew it in the CFL championship. I don't know. Whatever. Whatever it is. So you're going to say, but I'm in the middle of prayer, and I'm speaking to God. It comes along the Arizal, Rav Isaac Lurie, and he says, how can a person's mind go astray while they're in the middle of prayer? Because they open themselves up to sin. Once a person opens himself up to sin, prayer is a hard thing. There's no question. To stay focused and whatever, and you're right. Not going to say it's one of the three things the Gemara says always needs to be strengthened. That's 100% true. But with that being said, I still have to put my best foot forward. You got it. It's Gemara and Brachos. The exact quote I can find. I'll find the idea is that people feel that they're praying to a wall. It's not like God's come to us and all this and all that. So it's something that does need to be strengthened. But there are ways. We can't just run into prayer. Prayer is a huge topic. We're not gonna go through it. But the idea is you got to prepare. Great rabbis of, the Talmud says they prepared for an hour before they started to pray. Then they prayed for an hour, and then it took them another hour just downtime. That's how in tune they were. For us, Alavai, we're not just running into prayer. Because when a person runs into prayer, your mind's totally disheveled. Right? You're not thinking straight. You're totally not thinking straight. So, you got to give yourself a little bit of time. I'm not saying huge amounts of time over here. Right? What we're saying is you need a certain amount of time. You need a certain amount of time. But if not, then your mind is in 20 different places. Now think about preparing for Shabbos, let's say. So once candles are lit, person goes to synagogue, everything you thought of up until that point, all the everyday and all the craziness of our week goes out the window. I got to focus on spirituality. How do I do that? How do I get in tune with that? So again, it's all, life in general is preparation. We got to prepare. You got to prepare for holidays. If you don't prepare sometime before Passover, you're going to get anything out of Passover? No. You got to prepare. And every holiday, right, for us, has spiritual significance. Heavenly influence of that, let's say by Passover, it's all about redemption. And that the Jewish people in the future, when the Messiah comes, will be redeemed in the month of Nisan. So it's about past redemption, future redemption. That's why we have a fifth cup at the Seder for Elijah the prophet. That's future. But you got to prepare. You can't just run into Passover cleaning like a maniac and then get to the Seder. What are you going to give over? This is the same story my father taught me. Let's eat. You're not going to get that much out. So you say, okay, let me repent. Let me get it back. Well, when the holiday is over, it's gone. I don't get that spiritual influence. It's gone. When do I get it back? Gotta wait till next Passover. So we're going to read one day when I'm about 107 and a half, that, the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says this world is a portico, a vestibule to the next world. I like portico better. It's a portico, right? It's a portico to the next world. So we're preparing in this world, Jew or non-Jew, for that. How do I do that? God gave me a Torah. He gave me mitzvahs. Gave me all these things I have to do. Jews, non-Jews have less. Okay. It's preparation. The Gemara and Avodah Zarah 2b or 3a says you prepare on Erev Shabbos, you get to eat on Shabbos. What's the reference to? I prepare in this world, keep Torah mitzvahs, and in the next world, I'll get my rewards. In other words, you got to prepare now, and your reward comes. Right? I can say very simply, if you don't prepare food for Shabbos, before Shabbos, you don't eat on Shabbos. Right? That would be a simple thing, but here we're talking about getting reward in the next world. You got to prepare. If you don't prepare in this world, what are you going to get? Not saying you get absolutely zero. For some people, they'll get absolutely zero. Right? But even if someone comes into Passover and they didn't prepare that much, they'll get something. They'll get something. If they're holding, the right mentality and doing what they need to do, they'll get something, maybe. If it's all about, I knew somebody that, made a Passover Seder, the person refused to come in until we started to eat. Now, you think about me being closed-minded. Come on, what are you afraid of? Right? A little bit of spirituality. You call me in when we're eating. They won't hear anything from Egypt, nothing. So that person's going to get nothing, obviously. Eat a little bit of matzah, that's it. Fine. That's their choice. Somebody like that. So what do they get? Zero. But even us, we got to prepare. Holidays need preparation. This world needs preparation. How I'm supposed to live. What am I supposed to do? Musar. That's what Musar is all about. What I'm supposed to do. How am I supposed to lead my life properly? How I'm supposed to work on character traits. What I'm supposed to feel in this world. How I'm supposed to navigate this world. We have to know what to do. Right? And it's, looking at ourselves in the mirror, not always pleasant. Certainly not always pleasant. But we're a work in progress. Right? So, the idea of, learning in general, purpose of learning, right, is we have the ability to teach, put it in practice, but I have to remember what I learned. Now, one good thing is that when we learn, our soul is going to remember. Meaning that at the end of the day, what we're going to have is, we may think, I don't remember this, I don't remember that so well, but our soul remembers. So when we get the ultimate test, God's going to say, okay, did you learn Torah? Let's see what you learned. But you don't remember so much. Your soul remembers. So that's a benefit. Questions of what level, different things, okay? But the soul remembers. Now, if that's true, we'll see what comes out. Well, what about before that? What about knowing Torah like the back of my hand? It takes effort. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. There are things people don't like to do. Review, again, in general. Review, not something a lot of people probably like to do. But you can't acquire Torah without it. And sometimes a person will listen to something once. They hear certain things. They listen to it a second time. Totally different. They'll see different nuances. They'll hear things they didn't hear, before. A lot of potentially different things. But you don't look at it the same way necessarily. Maybe you get the main point. That could very well be. But it doesn't matter. Right? Review has to be done. It's crucial. The Avos Chaim, in his third volume of the Mishnah Berurah, in his introduction, and the third volume is all about the laws of Shabbos. The Avos Chaim there says, if you do not review these laws, you will transgress. Now, the Avos Chaim is not cursing anyone here. He's telling you reality. The reality is the laws of Shabbos, certainly for a Jew, are, there's so many laws in all kinds of different aspects of the laws of Shabbos. You don't review that, how are you not going to transgress? You will transgress. It's not possible not to transgress. That's not a curse over here. Definitely not a curse. He's telling you it's a reality. So, we have to understand how crucial Torah is and how crucial what I learn is and how crucial keeping mitzvahs is. Because there, what did Rebbe Eliezer ben Horkinus, what is he known for? Again, what is he known for? He didn't forget anything. right? It's like a cemented cistern, doesn't lose a drop. So we said to him, what was the most important thing? The most important thing was not forgetting something that he learned. That was the primary importance. So that is only given to a person God wants them to have it. Right? They want to work on, that attribute of not forgetting. Very good. But if God doesn't help you, you're certainly in trouble. But you have to have the desire not to want to forget. And there are things that we have to do, that we have to know how to do them and how to do them properly. And then go through it again and again and again till I know like second nature. People will make mistakes. Right? We're not perfect, but a person learns best from their mistakes. That's for sure. Why? Because, if a person's not arrogant and they see that, well, we're not perfect, but we have to keep what God says without being OCD, what do we have to do? We have to work hard over here. And not get, probably so depressed if we forget something, we made a mistake. Okay. But when a person makes a mistake, whether it's egregious or not, when a person makes a mistake, they learn from it. They should learn from it. Woe to the person that keeps making the same mistake again and again. That is certainly not good. So when it comes to Yom Kippur, I'm going to speak about Yom Kippur tomorrow. My class on the book of Leviticus, chapter 16, 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time. And, Yom Kippur is all about confession. It's all about saying, I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. Now, what do you have to remember about confession? What we have to remember is, okay, let's look before Yom Kippur. What am I confessing? What did we say that we did wrong? Right now, if we're confessing the same thing we did last year and the same thing we did the year before, and we're still doing the same things over and over and over again, that's not good. That 100% is not good. Now, there might be things that we've overcome to a certain extent that we fall back and okay, that's an issue. But if you're talking about something where, let's say a person has different trials and tribulations, they failed. They did something wrong, so to speak. So there, a person's going to beat their chest and say, okay, I did this wrong. But that's not the same thing you did last year. So you can say it's a different level, it's a different thing. Okay. But it's not the same thing. So a person should be whistling Dixie. I don't know how to do that, but, you should be whistling Dixie over here, doing the moonwalk because you're not doing the same things you did last year or the year before. Because that is digression. A person wants to see that they're growing. Now, I would tell, some people will say, wow, it's so hard. I failed this and I failed that, and why bother? So a person has to realize. I told someone this the other day. A person has to realize, where were you 2 years ago? 5 years ago? Now, whoever person is in the process, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it is, they are not the same person they are today. They're not holding in the same place. Right? I would ask Dan, who's going to make fun of him about the CFL? Nobody, except for me. Right? It's only going to be me. Right? No one, 2 years ago, well, I've been doing this for almost a couple of years. So you go before that, someone going to make fun of him because of the CFL? No. Right? But knowledge is power. Because what I know now, I didn't know before. Or maybe I did, but now it's different. Right? And someone told me they watched one of my videos, on the book of Leviticus. They said, wow, I thought one thing, you just took it to a whole different level. Right? A whole different understanding. There are ways to look at things. But that means that, yeah, you gained the knowledge. You didn't have that knowledge before. Right? Whatever this great thing I gave over. Right? But a year ago, half a year ago, the knowledge that you acquired is not the same. Those are building blocks. That's a tremendous thing to see. That a person has greater knowledge. Tremendous thing. There's no question. So we should be happy about that. I mean, we're not going to, be egotistical here. But look where they came from 2 years ago, 5 years ago. Do I have a long way to go? Does the person have a long way to go? 100%. We all have a long way to go. But a person can be so depressed, oh, I made this mistake, this, that. Look where you're holding before. Look what you did before, right? In comparison, this is a huge thing. There's a huge thing here. We should be thankful where we've been, where we are now, where we came from. But the evil inclination doesn't let up. So someone here says, is there a difference between learning and taking Torah into your soul? Now, learning in general, right, or let's say better, that a person can have a good memory and just remember everything, not necessarily. Not when it comes to Torah. Torah is not like anything else. Mathematics, I can remember certain theorems, whatever, put into action, very good. Right? And just repeat it, remember it, this, that, whatever. Science, I can remember certain things, how they work, how the body works. A lot of it's memorization. But then you got to put into action. That's a whole different thing. Then you have to say, okay, if this happened, that happened, how do you diagnose this or diagnose that? Okay, so then you have to apply it. Application's a different thing. But first of all, you have to have the knowledge, right? So if a person, let's say, a person learns, what do we say before we say the Shema? Right? In the morning we say, Lilmod lamed lishmor v'lasos. Paragraph before the Shema. Lilmod, I should learn Torah. The lamed, if I had the ability, I should teach Torah. Or at least, learn it, teach myself. Lishmor v'lasos, I should guard it, I should keep it. I should guard it, I should keep it. Now, once I learned, does that mean I put it in my life? There are people that can parrot things. And they, one of my rabbis once, some missionaries came up to him, they want to talk, about Tractate Baba Kama. Right? It's all about laws of damages. Right? Most of it. So they were repeating things verbatim, exactly what the Talmud said. So one of my rabbis started asking questions. They didn't understand anything. All they did was repeat it. They didn't get the knowledge. They repeated it, but they couldn't make any inferences. They couldn't make any conclusions. Nothing, because they repeated it like a parrot, right? So learning means, now not everything I learn is necessarily practical. We have to try and make it as practical as possible, but there are many things that don't apply today. Laws of, sacrifices do not apply today. Right? They just don't. We don't have a temple today. So it doesn't mean I don't have to learn them. I still have to learn them. Right? But things that do apply, right? Let's say, someone's Jewish, blessings, they do apply. You got to put in action. Musar, I have to try and put in action. Learning about it is good. That there's no question. Saying it out loud, also very good. Why? Because the mind hears what you said. Right? And certainly many prayers you have to say out loud. Obviously not so loud so you disturb someone else, but you have to say it loud enough so you hear, because that has an effect. It has an effect on the mind, has an effect on the soul. Right? So if I learn something, that certainly has an effect. But if I learn something, I don't put it into action. That's bad. If it's practical. Right? If it's practical, it's one thing. If it's not so practical, person may not delve into it so much or whatever. But what you have to do, there's no question, is you got to put it into practice. Because if you don't put it into practice, then it's all theoretical. Right? It's all theoretical. It's like mental gymnastics. I got enjoyment out of it. It was very nice. Maybe inspirational. So what? Something could be inspirational. What happens if, I have to live by it? I want to implement. Doesn't mean the evil inclination makes it so easy. Right? But learning it and doing it are two different things. You can learn it, doesn't mean it goes in your heart. You have to put it in your heart. You have to work at that. You have to exemplify what it says. I always tell my wife that, listen, if I I would listen to half the things I'd say, I'd also look different. You got to implement. You got to live inspired. You got to do what you learn. Put it into practice. If a person, right, the person points out very well, if a person just repeats things and doesn't change, that's not what Torah is. You might get some level of credit for learning Torah like that. But if you don't put it in action, what's it worth? If it doesn't change you, it's not worth very much. Totally not worth very much. It's all theoretical. Right? Totally theoretical. If it's theoretical and it's mental gymnastics, there are some people that enjoy the give and take, let's say, of learning Gemara, and they don't apply it. They totally don't apply it. Why? It's mental gymnastics. Now, I asked my Rebbe this question: someone who learns mental gymnastics, Torah, like mathematics, they get credit for it. He said they get something for it, but it's not really called learning Torah. They get some aspect of it. So that's why Rav David of Karlin put on his lectern, Shavisi Hashem Unegdi Tamid. God's in front of me at all times. I never forget I'm learning God's Torah. Never ever want to learn like mental gymnastics. You don't put it into practice, not worth anything. What's it worth? You're going to say, but doesn't get the mitzvah of learning Torah? Not so simple. Not so simple. You get something, but see, Torah has to affect. If Torah doesn't affect, it's mental gymnastics. If it's mental gymnastics, that's very scary. Now, most people today are not going to learn it for mental gymnastics. They won't do it. Vast majority. There are some people that will, but the vast majority won't. They'll do other things. They're not going to do this. Right? But if somebody does do it, let's make clear, it's not something that, first of all, A, is going to stick. But B, they're just doing it because, it's intellectually stimulating. Okay? If that's the case, that's not called Torah. Doesn't matter what it looks like. The other so-called Jewish movements don't even do that. And the people Reform and Conservative know how to learn? Of course not. Never spent any time. It's not even mental gymnastics. Nothing. Nothing. Right? Now, it's a harsh thing to say, but they don't know how to learn. They certainly don't know how to learn. Right? So, they're not out to change. And sometimes a person will learn something, let's say in Musar, that's hard to change. That 100% is hard to change. It's, but you got to work at it some level. Someone points out, a person can read something, remember something, very quickly, that's good. Well, the question is, again, I have a lot of garbage in my brain. Stuff that, I could bring out, I'm not going to say verbatim, but whatever, a lot of things I remember over the last 20, 30 years. And it's useless information, right? I guess sometimes comes out for whatever reason, but totally useless information. Imagine, with all that useless information that was filled with Torah. Yeah, it would have been a Torah giant years ago. Yeah, I'm going to waste time with sports and movies and other things. Years ago. No offense to any Torah giants out there. Right? It's wasted. Totally wasted. I heard someone once say, let's say a person reads the newspaper, they're a news junkie, whatever. At the end of the year, tell me what you heard. Tell me what you remember. Yeah, this war, scandals, it's all the same, just different names. Maybe different places. Stock market was up, it was down, this, that. Yeah, so you spend all this time, whatever it was. A person going to say, I got to be up to date, got to know what's going on in the world. A friend of mine would say, if there's a war, I'll find out about it. Like, who says I have to know these things? And then this person gives their spin, someone else. It's useless information. You know why? Because God runs the world. It doesn't matter. My Rebbe once told me many years ago, there's a lot of bus bombings here. God forbid, day in, day out, they're like, buses getting blown up or whatever. And, I was very much into politics then. Jewish, Israeli politics, whatever. So whatever. I was telling him like this, telling him like that, the other thing, whatever. And he said, your obligation is to learn. He's like, let me ask you a question. Are you happy 95% of the time the way God runs the world? So I thought about it. I was like, probably. Because the other 5% you're not going to understand in 10 lifetimes. It's not about political pundits. It's not about this, not about that. God runs the world. God's the one in charge. And we don't really understand what's going on. A lot of things we don't understand. Not the topic for now. Right? A lot of things we don't understand. So why waste your time on this? Wasted energy. Yeah, you got to protect yourself. Whatever. You got to put your best foot forward. Very good. Everything else, forget about it. It's a waste of time. What's the most important thing is learning Torah. Finished. That's the most important thing. But I'll tell you the truth. I just read this again. Rabbi tells the story. Tells the story of Balatanya. Balatanya had a student that was going to go to university. He told the student, you got to be careful. Because if you go to university, there's a lot of heresy there. You got to be very careful. So the student turned around and said, come on. I learned by you for many years. I didn't become so righteous. If I didn't become so righteous by you, if I go to university, I'm not going to be so bad. That's not going to have an effect on me either. So the Balatanya said, you're making a big mistake. You're making a big mistake. Because impurity, all you have to do is touch a dead body, you're impure. Touch. You want to absorb Torah? Yeah, you got to work at it. It doesn't stick to you like glue. You got to work. Right? You got to you got to turn up your sleeves. You got to work hard. It's not something that's going to stick automatic. It's not. You got, it's a struggle day in and day out. Right? So even a person who's got a great memory and God gives them, to remember, that's very good. You got to put into practice. Remembering's not enough, right? Because that's mental gymnastics. That's just repeating things like a parrot. That means I'm not getting the message. Oh, but I remember what it says. Okay. It's about implementation. Let's make one thing clear, as we're ending here. Judaism does not care about what a person thinks in general. I mentioned 2 weeks ago, my class in the book of Leviticus, chapter 16, person can be punished for their thoughts. There are certain things, idolatry, other things, person can be punished by what they think, regardless of whether they acted on it or not. But in general, what a person thinks, words of my heart don't really mean a whole lot. We have to control what we think. But what's in a person's mind, you can have this knowledge. Okay. It could be totally wasted knowledge. What does it do for them? What does it do for them? It doesn't do anything. Because it's all about spirituality. Right? It's all about my service to God. Either I'm going up or going down. And these things take me away. Why? And it might be interesting, might be fun, all that, but it takes me away. Because I draw myself further away from God. That's not what he wants. Totally not what he wants. He wants me to draw close. So when I learn Torah, I draw close. When I go against what he says, I take 2 steps backwards. So remember, if I take 2 steps backwards, that means I have to take 2 steps forward in order to get back to zero. See, so when a person sins in general, you're in a deficit. By the end of the week, you'll be in a major deficit. By the end of the month, again, either I'm drawing close to God or I'm not. Just gave over the 13 principles of faith. The Rambam says God is absolute. God doesn't change. God's not fickle. Morality is not relative. So based on that, the Rambam says either I serve God or I serve idols. Now, idols don't necessarily mean the short little fat guy, right? Mr. Buddha or a guy in a stick. Doesn't mean you're serving necessarily, these type of idols. Get something, you give power. That should have no power at all. Money, fame, entertainment, whatever. These things, you take God out of the picture, right? That can be idolatry. Food. Food easily can be idolatry. It's unbelievable how much people eat, how much people waste also, right? But, I remember just like sometimes it's like watching people just like shovel it in like Asa. You see that, it says, give me some of this red stuff. I'm going to die. So Yaakov makes him swear, sell his birthright. So he sells his birthright. He says, fine, give it to me. And he shovels it in, the Medrash says. Shovels it in. Like no tomorrow. The thing people eat, mom's like a vacuum cleaner. She's suck it in. They haven't eaten in 3 days. Mom is starving. So, I say people have desires, different things, okay? But we have to control what we see. We have to control at the best of our ability. We have to control what we hear. We have to control what's in our mind. But our mind can be so clouded from things for so many years, it's hard to fight. Very hard to fight. Right? But in general, if a person is not gifted with such a great memory, and even if they are, you have to work to make it stick. But it's not just about remembering. It's not just about being a parrot. It's about implementing what it says. What the Torah says, what the ideas are. Because if not, then we're guilty of mental gymnastics. God forbid. And if we're guilty of mental gymnastics, it's very hard to fight. Very, very hard to fight. Because it's enjoyable, I get so much benefit from it, all these things, but guess what? It's not what I should be doing. It's 100% not what I should be doing. Again, Judaism, not about what I think, in general. Judaism is about action. But people say, what about what I have to know? What about what I have to understand? Okay, you have to. There are things you're obligated. You have to know what to do. You have to know what's behind it. And you have to work on it. Right? 100%, you have to work on it. And that's what we have to do. But you got to implement. It's not so easy. Right? Not so easy. So I guess we didn't get through this Mishnah, which I didn't think we would. Right? It's only on the first part of the Mishnah here. So next week, we're going to hit chapter 2, Mishnah 11, part 2. And I guarantee there'll probably be part 3, 4, and 5. There is, there's quite a bit to say. I'll just mention one other thing. When it comes to memory and review, you can't get discouraged. Because even if you forget something, you gotta put in full force. You just gotta keep going and going, and whatever. It's something you have to work at. But remember,
always room for improvement, for sure.
Not only that, but God has to grant it. If God doesn't grant it, however good a person's memory is, that's not going to help. But the most important thing is not only to remember, but to implement. Not just about what I think, but I have to implement. And that, as we'd say on Tanakh Talk, is a wrap.
All right. Sounds good for me. I got to be back in about half an hour with another class with Rabbi Aaron David Poston. I want to thank Rabbi Coffman for doing this lesson today. And we will be back next week, as you heard from him, Hashem willing, same time, with part 2 of Mishnah 11 of chapter 2 of Pirkei Avos. Excellent stuff. We're going to sign up for now. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody. Bye for now.